let's carry on and talk about what object schedules look like. So here are some examples. This is an example for a kid. I know that the picture's not super clear, but it'll give you a sense. These are cards. They have 3D representations on them. They're Velcroed to a strip top to bottom. And on most of them, there's also a picture communication symbol. And that's because they're teaching this individual to understand what the symbols are, and then they're gonna fade the objects away, okay? So this is a top to bottom schedule. It's not the way I typically sequence things in a schedule. Does anybody want to hazard a guess as to why I prefer left to right over top to bottom? Literacy skills. There's one situation where it's not appropriate to do a left to right schedule, and that's if the individual has difficulty crossing midline. OTs taught me this. Go talk to your OTs. So if an individual has a problem physically crossing midline, so reaching across one side, so if I'm right-handed and I need to go get something at the beginning of my schedule that's on the left and I don't cross midline well, I'm gonna have difficulty accessing that item. But there are also individuals who visually have difficulty crossing midline, so they don't scan left to right very well. Now, OTs can work on this, right? So I've had kids where this has been an issue and it's improved over time working with an OT. But for those kids, at least initially until we kind of deal with the midline issue, we would use an up-down schedule so that when they're standing in front of their schedule, the whole schedule is accessible to them because they see all of this. They can scan up and down, but they don't scan left to right very well. And the whole point of a schedule is look and see everything else that's coming up so that you know. But if you can't look and see left to right and scan that way, you're not getting the information, right? So I'll typically use left to right unless I already know that this midline crossing thing is an issue, or if I'm using a left to right schedule and the kid seems to be having some problems, I'll check with an OT. It's also just a really easy thing to check. If you sit a kid down and you put a desired item on one side, and if the kid is right-handed, right, just not let them use their left hand, see, do they reach across? If they reach across with their right hand, if they reach across with their left hand, you're probably okay. But if they consistently use right hand to reach right, use left hand to reach left, they might be having an issue with that midline crossing, and then you want to think about how that might impact your setup of a visual schedule. That's all, right? Otherwise, always left to right because it lays a nice foundation for literacy because that's how we read, left to right, top to bottom. In this schedule, these are just little plastic bins. In every single bin is an object cue that represents an activity. So circle time, there's a book, because for this kid, they read a book at circle every day. Math, there's a little puzzle piece, because that's what he's working on in math. Sandbox is a little plastic scoop, right? You know the sand area? The most favorite of all teachers is the sandbox. Snack has a little cup, and recess, it's hard for you to see, but it's a metal chain for recess. And that's because the swings on the playground are the metal chain swings. And how are we gonna represent swings? Well, the chain is what the kid holds on to. So off to Home Depot, you can roll out a bit of chain, cut off a hunk. Sometimes if you go and you say, you know, a schedule for a kid with autism, they'll give you the 6-inch piece of chain for free. They'll just say, take it. It's like, thank you, right? So always say what you're using this stuff for, because sometimes you'll get deals. This is another way of setting up an object cue schedule. I set this up for one of my individuals. The individual who had really significant cognitive impairments and took a very long time to learn objects. He was in a middle school setting. And in his middle school setting, he had to go from one place to another to another. And you know, if you think about schedules, say that he's using object cues and his object cue schedule is set up in the resource room. And then in his schedule is the symbol for gym. So he takes the symbol for gym and he goes to the gym. Well, now gym is over and we need to go back and check the schedule, but I have no way of telling you that we're going to our schedule. I don't have your schedule. We're kind of stuck, right? So what we did is got one of these little, again, I'll send you shopping, go buy one of these. It's got wheels, 3 drawers. The drawers housed all of the object cues, right? So that was the storage facility, right? And eventually we had them all labeled as well so that people were putting things away in the right spot and it was easy to find. And then we got these also from Home Depot. And for some kids, I only have 3 or 4 on the top, but with this one, we sort of made a base so that we could extend and have more bins, but attached all of these bins with zap straps. So I get my drill out, and if you hold your bin on the top and drill a hole, you can zap strap. You know what I mean by zap straps, those plastic tie things. Really thin plastic tie, the one end pokes into the other end and you pull it tight and it makes that zippery sound, right, zap straps. So you can zap strap this onto the lid of the big bin, and then right over here is a plastic garbage can drilled into the side, zap strapped in there, right, get tools, tools are helpful. That's the finished bin. And so the schedule has all of the items, and then as he works his way from left to right, every time a task is done, the item goes into the finished bin, right? And then you move to the next thing. Well, this way, he can now wheel his schedule wherever he goes in the school, right? So now it's portable. I had a different kid who was using object cues, and he had something like this at home just on a shelf with little bins, and what we made for him was a set of bins like this, and we made a little strap, a little holder, like that, that fit in the back of mom's van. And so when they went out into the community, they'd have the schedule, and they could carry it, and they'd put it in the van. Now, she wasn't going like grocery shopping, holding this long thing of bins. We taught him that every time something's over and you're in the community, you just go back to the car. And she had her keys, which she could use to show him that. And they'd go back to the car, and then they'd check the schedule and do the next thing. But that was a way that we made an object schedule portable for the community. Bins in the back of, right, the trunk or the back of the van or whatever, and you just stand at the back of the car, check your schedule, and carry on. So with these kinds of things, you have to get a bit creative sometimes, right? Here are a couple of other examples. Again, just simple bins. This is kind of like a first-then schedule. First eating, and then there's a CD-ROM, right? You get to put that into the computer. And then this is one where you can see that they've kind of cut tangible objects down and placed them on cards, and they're kind of starting to slice away the object. Eventually the goal will be to make them flatter and closer to being like a picture, and then they'll start to fade these out and fade in a picture. Does that make sense? Yeah. So different ways of setting up object schedules, and it's really about thinking, what does this individual need? How is this individual going to understand stuff? How am I going to make it portable if I need to make it portable, right? Kind of thinking about all of that. When you've got an individual using an object schedule, it's important to involve the individual in using the schedule. We're going to talk about this with using any kind of schedule as well, because it is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, where I'll come into a situation and I'll see adults setting up this kid's schedule and the kid is nowhere. And then they kind of wave the schedule near the kid, right? Here's your schedule, and the kid may or may not look. How does the kid know what's on the schedule, right? So involve the kid in the setup of the schedule. It might be that I give the kid the first object, here's the object, now you put it in, here's the second object, now you put it in, here's the third object, now you put it in, right? So I'm gonna direct you in putting everything in. I also might, for a student who's a little bit more advanced, start to provide information about what object. So I might have all of the objects on the table sort of mixed up. And let's say that photos are the next thing that I want to use with the student, and we're working on matching objects to photos. Well, then I'm going to show the photo of an activity. Find it, right? Can you find the representative thing and then put it in your schedule? And if I see that an individual is able to do that photo to object, select the right object over a few weeks, well, then that tells me I can fade out the objects because the person understands what the photos are, right? So that's also a way of kind of ongoing assessment too. But important to make sure that the student is participating in the setup, that they know what's in the schedule, not that they just sort of walk in and there are a whole bunch of objects set up in boxes. Right? That's not predictability. Right? Predictability is, I actually was engaged in touching every single item as it went into the boxes. I know what's coming up, or certainly I'm more likely to know what's coming up because I was involved, all right? The other thing that's important to do is that every transition, the learner comes back to the schedule and the learner does the transition, right? So the learner takes the object for the completed activity, drops it in the finished box, and then goes to the schedule and finds the next activity, the next item, takes that, goes and does that activity. When that activity is done, puts the item in the finished box, checks for the next activity, right? So again, they're participating in the manipulating of all of the items in their schedule. It's the same thing as checking their own things off their list. It's just that you're not checking off a list, you're putting items in the finished box. So really important to involve the people, right? Because otherwise, I mean, I can be over here doing your schedule, but that doesn't mean you know what's happening, right? Much more likely that you know what's happening if you're actually doing. And again, at the end of the day, I'm going for independence. I want people to be able to follow their own schedule. So if I were to say, check your schedule, the person knows what to do. That they go, that's finished, take the next thing, go do the next thing, da, 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 da. Right? That's the whole idea here, is to increase independence. So they're not gonna know how to do it if they don't actually participate. So another thing that we can do if we've got these large representations, because like with these ones, right? So Darren's 4-inch symbols that are on the wall, because they're too big to kind of do much with, you can use those little mini photo albums. They're kind of 4x6 in size. They're for photographs. You mostly now just get them at the dollar store. You can use that to put in all of your images. So particularly if you're using photos or larger symbols, it makes it more portable. The thing that you have to be careful about is that it's a book, which means you can only see one thing at a time. And when we're talking about predictability, we're talking about being able to see not just what I'm doing now, but what's coming up, right? So if I only see one thing at a time, and we're talking about individuals with autism who often don't hold things in their head very well, you turn the page and whatever they were just looking at is gone. And now they only know the one thing that they're looking at, so they don't get that sequence, right? What I will do in those kinds of situations is I'll get out my scissors and I'll cut the book apart into individual pages, and I'll get some packing tape and I'll tape them into an accordion fold. Sometimes at Michael's they have little accordion fold photo albums that you can get. So like I kind of haunt craft stores and craft departments and dollar stores, and I kind of collect this kind of stuff, right? But sometimes you can get accordion fold photo albums, which are even better because then you can sequence all of your photos for a schedule, close it up, it's nice and portable, put it in a backpack or whatever, but then when you need to see the schedule, you open it up and you can see everything all at once, right? Because a single page isn't helpful for most of our kids, most of our individuals. They see one thing, and as soon as that's gone, they forget it. So now the whole purpose of showing them a sequence of events has been defeated because they can't remember the sequence, right? So cut them apart, get out some packing tape, or find an accordion fold book is another way to do it. If you have individuals who are able to use small symbols, 2-inch, square, then you can use slide pockets, right? So these are those little slide pockets I talked about earlier. You can buy them on Amazon. Sometimes you can still get them in photography stores. This is just a piece of one cut off. It's really hard because the pockets themselves are clear, so it doesn't show up on slides ever very well. But these little symbols all fit inside a pocket, right? You can cut down, right? I had this one cut down, all I needed were 8 locations maximum anyway, and then you fold it up and you can put it in a pocket. I had little girls that I used to work with, twin girls, both of them deaf, both of them had autism, both of them used visual schedules, and they were really kind of girly girls, and they had little purses. They liked their little purses. And they had their schedules like this, and they would fold up their little plastic pages and pop it in their purse, and then they'd have their schedule in their purse with them and when they went out with mom. So that worked well. But I've also used this with teens because these pages come in 8.5 by 11 pages, 3 hole punch that fit in a binder. And I've worked with teens who, in a high school setting, they require a visual schedule, but they don't want it to look like they're using a visual schedule. And I can put this in a binder, and they're carrying around a binder that looks like everybody else carrying around a binder. And so I've worked with individuals who kind of have that awareness of, like, I don't want to look different from everybody. I know I need this. I like my schedule, but I don't kind of want to look like I have a schedule. And so that's a nice alternative too. It's a nice way of kind of the best of both worlds. They get what they need, but they also kind of get to look cool, right? So that's another thing that you can do. The problem with these is that they require a bit of fine motor skill to get the symbols in and out. So for individuals who have poor motor skills, being able to take those symbols out, flip them over when they're done and put them back in is a bit difficult. So a couple things you can do. You can cut a little V in the plastic at the front of the pocket. I've done that before because then you can get your thumb on the symbol, makes it way easier. Or if you're buying your big rolls of Velcro anyway, you need now something to use it for. You can put Velcro on binder covers and build your schedule on the cover of the binder and store all of the rest of your symbols inside the binder. So you put Velcro inside as well. And so now for individuals who have challenges with their motor skills, it's just a point of lifting the symbols on and off the Velcro instead, right? And then their schedule's on the front of the binder. Everything is inside that they're not using, and when things are finished, they rip it off the cover, open the binder, slap it inside, that's done. And you can do that with a big binder, or you can use a small binder, right? So that's another way, okay? In terms of the portability thing, portability is always an issue. So I mentioned the twins that I worked with. Their mom, thankfully, was a bit of a seamstress. And one of the problems that we had with the girls, because they were both deaf and they were also signing, is that when they were using paper-based kind of schedules with those little slide pockets and putting them in their little purses, that was all well and good, and they'd pull them out and they'd be talking, but when they went to talk, their hands are busy. And even, you know, they had one hand, but a lot of times what would happen is the schedule would get put down in the community, and they'd talk, and then they'd walk away, and they'd lose the schedule. Somebody would forget something somewhere. And Mom and I were kind of talking about this and talking about Velcro. And anyway, Mom went and bought some fabric and started doing a bit of work. And she designed the Portacom system. This is now her business. So this is a BC-made product, and the girls are adults. And I think the girls actually help make them now. But you wear it around your waist. Has anybody seen the Portacom? There are a few, yeah. Every so often I'll ask and people will, oh yeah, we know the Portacom. So it goes around your waist, you open it up, it's got that nice Velcloth in it. That's why, again, we have rough Velcro on the symbols so that the symbols will attach to the cloth. And you can build your schedule inside that way, right? You can also put other kinds of visual supports in here. So for the girls, we used to have scripts of routines, you know, how are you supposed to behave in this situation, you know, all kinds of visual supports that we would sort of put in there. And she makes single pages, so you can actually stack and have multiple pages. You end up with kind of a fat Portacom, but you can have lots of pages in there too. So that's a really nice option. And there's a zippered pocket that goes inside. And so when something is finished, you take the symbol out off the schedule and you put it in the zippered pocket to show that it's finished. So there are a variety of things that, that she's put together.